Welcome to the Safeguarding Podcast. In each episode, we discuss a different topical safeguarding issue with a range of different guest speakers. Please be aware some of this content is sensitive and listener discretion is advised. In this episode, I speak with Nicole Rodden, who is one of the co-founders of the organisation Life Lessons. We discuss topics such as peer-on-peer abuse and how to create a positive peer culture within a school. Hello everyone, welcome to the Safeguarding Podcast. I'm Georgia Latif. I am the content manager at the Safeguarding Company, and I'm really excited today because I'm joined by Nicole Rodden, who is one of the co-founders of Life Lessons. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thanks. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, great to have you with us. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about what Life Lessons does and how the company was created, because you guys are quite new, aren't you?
Yes, we are quite new. So we were founded a couple of years ago, and Life Lessons works with schools to create open and empathetic school cultures. And so we do that by supporting teachers to deliver an evidence-based relationship, sex and health education. And it's all around fostering positive peer relations between pupils. And we do that through kind of bringing pupil voice into the classroom. And through our kind of video material, we film young people from different backgrounds, sexualities, genders, ethnicities, talking about their experiences. And then through that, give teachers the tools to have those conversations. And yeah, it's been a really interesting time starting out. We're a new, quite innovative solution, and I think it's a really great opportunity at the moment when these topics are at the forefront of lots of teachers' minds and lots of pupils' minds as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a really big shift in recent years from sex and education. I remember when I was in school, it was very much, don't get an STI or an STD, don't get pregnant. These are what all the parts of your anatomy are called.
Yes.
And that was it. I was glad to hear my sister, who's a bit younger than me, when she went through sex education, they talked about consent and they talked about same-sex sex, basically. So it was less traditional and a bit more open. Why do you think it's important, the work you guys are doing in educating teachers on how to have these conversations with their students?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. And all the people we talk to when we say, how was your sex education at school, say it was very negative, very focused on just don't do this, don't get pregnant, don't, and that things are changing now because the research shows that actually if we're teaching about consent, about relationships, it's going to help young people, equip them with the skills and the knowledge to be able to have healthy relationships and have more consensual, intimate sexual experiences. And that it actually helps young people wait longer before having sex.
Okay.
And so it's really important to equip our teachers to be able to have these conversations, because often, some parents are talking about these topics with their children, but actually young people say to us, and the research is that they desperately want to be talking about this topic. They desperately want to be having these conversations to work out their opinions, but they want to be having these conversations with teachers because it's a boundaried conversation.
Yeah.
It's trustworthy, so it's not just with their friends where it's potentially hearsay thing, lots of some misinformation, but it's a safe space where they can share things or discuss things in a way that feels more comfortable.
I guess as well, no one wants to talk about sex with their parents. Like no child wants to do that. And I guess with teachers, they teach so much about life. They should also be talking about this. It's a really important part of growing up, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's skills based, it's these skills that we need. It's not just a given that you're going to be successful in having healthy relationships. It's something that needs to be nurtured and taught, how to do that, and modeled that openness and these skills of critical thinking, to be able to ask yourself, like, am I in a relationship that makes me feel good? Or am I in a friendship group that wants the best for me? And it's those skills of reflection, like critical thinking, self-compassion, like those things, and building that empathy and respect for others. And actually what we are seeing is that since COVID and since the lockdown, a lot of young people are really struggling with their relationships, and they're struggling to show that level of empathy and respect to their peers and to their teachers. And actually struggling to be kind to one another because they've missed out essentially on a couple of years of developing those skills and nurturing those skills. So it is so important that, those skills are essential for life. When you leave school and you're going to be in workplaces, your relationships with your colleagues or, your family relationships. And it's so important that we do teach those skills in school.
Definitely. We were talking about consent just a moment ago. At what age do you think we should be educating children about consent?
So I think it's interesting the word consent often leads us to a definition of quite like the legal side of consent, and that it's specifically to do with sex. Like,
but it's not really, is it?
It's not really. Like, you can have consent about a broad range of things. It's about personal boundaries, really. It's about respect, and knowing what those boundaries are, and your own privacy and your own right to your body or your things. And so consent can be taught from a really, really young age, just in a different way. For example, like, you wouldn't, if my phone was on the table, like, you wouldn't just take it and have a look through it. And so those things you can be teaching from a young age, or even, this is his toy and he can choose to share it, and modeling that kind of consent at a really young age.
It's kind of normalizing it, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And I think it's important that we do teach it, the idea that your body is your body, and it's your right to, not let other people touch it if you don't want. And it's up to you to decide that, and giving young people the choice to do that, because safeguarding for, in an adult with adults is really important for us to be teaching children about.
Of course.
And so I think it does need to be happening at a younger age. And actually, when we talk to our young people who are often learning about consent in year 10, say, they all say we should be learning about it in year 8.
Oh, definitely. I think like by year 10, 11, it's like, it should have happened earlier, shouldn't it? Like, I've been seeing a lot of conversations about this around children, like you said, being able to say no when people touch them. And I think children are conditioned from really young ages to, like, go give grandma a kiss, go sit on Santa's lap, go give your uncle a hug, share your toys because you have to. And it kind of teaches you at a really young age, you're conditioned to not have boundaries. So it's interesting. I feel like what you're saying, it's a culture shift, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And I think, people, when they leave school and they're in relationships, and it's only then that we're talking about boundaries, or with family, it's only when you get a bit older that people actually are having these conversations of like, I need to put these boundaries in place, and I've not been taught how to do that. I don't know how to do that. And I think that's such an important skill to be teaching, that actually you don't need to give your auntie a kiss if you don't want to, and that's okay. And empower young people to make those choices. And I think that's a really healthy way to be.
That's great. I think as well, it just comes to mind, one of my friends doesn't really like to be hugged, but she said the lockdown's actually been great because people having to socially distance, she's had an excuse not to hug people, and now she can just keep saying to people like, well, I actually don't want to be touched. I don't want to be hugged. And it's made her a bit braver to have those conversations, because it was normalised, this idea of like, check with someone before you shake their hand, check with someone before you give them a hug, make sure they're going to be comfortable with that. So interesting that it took a pandemic to bring that up.
I know, that is true. And now we do have more of a respect maybe for somebody's...
For people's spaces.
For people's spaces, yeah. I was actually, I was talking to a woman who is blind and she has a guide dog, and she was saying that lots of people come up to her and just instantly stroke her dog.
Yeah.
You know, without asking, without saying, and that dog is her sight. It's her eyes, and it's so personal.
Invasive, isn't
it's so
it?
invasive.
Yeah.
And what might be seen as a a friendly, it's a dog that you want to touch, but actually consent is everything. It is about thinking about people's boundaries and having that level of respect. Like your friend who doesn't want to be hugged, that's fine, that's okay, that's what she wants. And so it is important for us to be aware of other people's spaces and be respectful about that.
Yeah, and I guess also just the consideration of you might be comfortable with that, but someone else might not. So yeah, I think you're right, they are important skills we need to be teaching children from a very young age. I wanted to talk to you about some of the videos that Life Lessons produces in which you have students talking to each other about some of these issues. Why do you think it's important for their voices to be heard in these discussions?
Our young people are amazing. Whenever we do filming, I'm always so struck by how articulate and insightful and reflective, and young people often find, or what the research shows, is that if relationship, sex, health education isn't directly relatable to young people, they're not going to relate to it and engage with it and actually utilize that learning in particular situations. So, you could have the best RSE in the world that's filled with facts and knowledge, but if the young people aren't then relating that back to their own lives and seeing that connection, they're not going to utilize that learning in a party situation or in with their friends. And so it's really important, if we want to have an impact, we want to see a change and a shift, we need to be getting real stories and real experiences of what young people today are going through,
so they can relate to it.
Exactly. And there's some topics and some things that come up in the videos that just weren't applicable when I was at school. We're in such a digital age where young people are living out so much of their relationships, like we all are, online.
Social media.
On social media. And there was our young people talking about how being left on pending on Snapchat is just awful, because you don't know where you stand, you're not accepted, you're not rejected, and these things do play into young people's mental health. And there's little things like that the benefits of having online relationships versus in person, and it's important that we bring those voices and those experiences of young people, but also that they're from different backgrounds. It's not just...
It's diversity as well, isn't it?
Yes. And other young people will connect to different things depending on... one of our young people was saying they connected to her because of her fashion sense, or her accent, or his experience of coming out, or of, these things that young people, they desperately want to hear real life situations. And actually, a lot of the time, young people say they know the law on consent. They can tell you the law on consent. But what they actually want to know is all those situations and areas where it's not so black and white. How do I deal in that? How do I bring up the topic of contraception? Like, I know all the types of contraception, but how do you actually bring up the conversation when you're in that moment?
How do you not spoil the mood?
Exactly. And they're these things that our young people are questioning and are wondering about, and actually they just really want to hear from young people who have had experiences, have reflected on them, have learned from it, whether that's about friendships, about relationships, about family, about their own mental health. And it just ties in. And I think it's helpful for young people to then be able to talk about it through someone else's experience.
Of course, yeah. Once again, it's that relatability, isn't it?
And it's less personal. They can talk about, they don't have to talk about their own experiences. They're talking through someone else.
Yes.
About what they connect to.
So do you think creating this positive peer culture within schools will hopefully help us move towards preventing more peer-on-peer abuse?
Yes, because first of all, if we think about the causes of where actually peer-on-peer abuse comes from, a lot of the time it's because it's so normalised.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, the recent Ofsted report and everyone's invited, and lots of young people, they aren't aware, because we just live in a society where it is so normalised, that this anything's wrong. So why would a young person report anything or share something or even see it as a bad thing, because it's so normalised? And so what we need to do is, first of all, to raise awareness about what is peer-on-peer abuse and what is sexual harassment, and what are those, where is that line, and make that really clear, and then focus on developing empathy and respect between young people. Because it is really important for teachers to say, don't do this, or, you know, this is wrong and this is inappropriate. That's really important for everyone to be hearing that, and for everyone to be saying, you know, the same message. But if a friend calls you out, or if it's not socially acceptable to be abusive or rude or offensive, that's a lot more powerful, having your peers hold you to account.
Of course, yeah.
Than it is an adult or a teacher. And so by developing more sort of understanding, like boys understanding what is actually going on for girls, and girls understanding what's going on for boys, like vice versa, and building that understanding will help to shift this culture of peer-on-peer abuse, that actually it's not acceptable, and I don't want to be doing that. That's not the person that I want to be.
So just before, when you spoke about girls understanding what boys are going through and vice versa, I remember when sex education happened for me when I think we first heard about it like 13, 14, and they took all the boys out of the room to talk like with the girls alone, and the boys would talk about things alone. And it just makes you wonder, oh, that's weird. Why can't the boys listen? What are they talking about? So do you reckon everyone should just be learning the same things? We should all find out about what the other gender goes through?
It's a really interesting one. This comes up a lot with the schools that we talk with. Our advice to schools, because the research is quite split. I think what we say to our schools is that everyone should be learning the same thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, we did have this period of time where girls learned about periods and boys learned about wet dreams. And that was the distinction.
Yeah.
And it wasn't shared. You know, boys need to also learn about periods, and girls need to learn about wet dreams. Like, it's important that we share it, because there's so much shame. Like, a lot of girls find so much shame around your period, and
something that's so natural. Yeah. Something that's just not big taboo subject for no reason, really. Yeah.
For no reason. And actually educating just gets rid of some of those myths, and it just really helps to have a conversation. And young people talk, like they're going to talk in the playground about, what did you learn? Well, what did you learn? Oh, we didn't learn about that. And it just builds up these stereotypes that just aren't there, because, you know, and these stigmas that we need to change. But I would say that they need to be learning the same thing.
Yeah.
But there is a space for girls and for boys to talk separately with other young people that are going through something similar to them. That is a safe space where they, you know, some of our young people do say, I feel a bit more open to ask certain questions around just girls or around just boys, which is fair. And I think there does need to be spaces or teachers that they can go to have to ask those questions, and to, you know, if they don't feel comfortable asking it in a room full of boys and girls. And so sometimes lots of our form time activities are all around discussion. And for that, we say, mix up the groups And then for some of the discussions, have it all girls and all boys. And so they're talking with their peers about a particular topic, and they're talking just with girls or just with boys, but then they're sharing back as a class.
Yeah. Do you think it's important as well with mixing boys and girls? Because we've talked about the two genders, but we've not talked about people who maybe don't identify as either.
Yes.
So I guess by doing it all together, you're not excluding that really important group and marginalising them.
Exactly. And that is so key. You know, if you are splitting anything with gender, where do your non-binary students go? Where you're really thinking about being inclusive. And that is why, you know, focusing on making sure that everyone does feel comfortable, and finding other opportunities to provide those safe spaces for people after the lesson or in break time or something like that other young people, rather than splitting everyone by gender and not being inclusive for all of our young people.
We run the risk now. We're in an age where not all women menstruate, and not all those who identify as women will menstruate. So I think it's important, like you said, that it's inclusive and everyone feels really safe in that space.
Yeah.
Moving on to teachers, how would you encourage teachers to not feel uncomfortable about some of these topics? Because we are moving away from the textbook, this is how everything works. And I know that students want to have discussions about things like masturbation and pleasure during sex. And even saying it on the podcast feels a bit weird, to be honest. This is my workplace. But how do we normalise these conversations so there isn't this awkwardness? Because it is things that children and students do need to talk about.
Yeah, and I think it is an awkward topic. Like, we live in a society and in a culture where we don't talk about these things a lot. We don't talk about sex and relationships that openly. And so we're not used to doing it. And it does feel really uncomfortable and really awkward. And I think for so many teachers, like if you're a maths teacher or a geography teacher and you've never spoken about these topics before, why, you know, just thinking that you can go into a class and deliver these topics is really tricky, really, really challenging.
Yeah.
But I think it's a skill that we practice. And the more that we do it, the less it feels so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it normalises it, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it just becomes a conversation that we talk about, which does happen in other countries where they are maybe a bit more open, or that they can talk about it with a little bit more openness. So I think it is something that we need to practice, and it gets easier. But I would say that there are a few key things that schools need to do in order to help teachers feel confident, because we can't assume that all of our teachers are just going to waltz into a relationships class and feel comfortable.
Exactly.
And I think one of the important things is that we use distancing tools so that the teacher doesn't feel like, because one thing that comes up a lot is that teachers feel like they need to bring in their own personal experiences, or they're going to have to bring in something of themselves and be asked personal questions. And actually that's through using the videos, we find that teachers can use it as a distancing tool. So it's, you know, what do you think of Liam's experience? What do you think of this other young person's experience? It's not anything to do with me and me as a teacher, or, you know, because that's not appropriate. And again, we're like modeling those boundaries. But actually it's, well, what do we think of these young people's experiences of this, and being able to talk about it openly, but through that lens. And also some reassurance for teachers that they don't need to know everything. Like we don't need to know everything. And that's okay. And it's okay to say, which feels really strange as a teacher because you're looked at as the expert, but actually with this kind of topic that's constantly changing and evolving, and we can be a bit more exploratory with our young people and bring in their opinions and their experiences, and feel that it's okay to say, do you know what, that's a really good question. I don't want to give you I've got an answer, but I want to go away and have a think about it and come back to you, because that's a really, thank you for the question. And that's okay to do when it comes to this kind of subject.
Perfect. I think we've been talking a lot about this kind of a situation in a planned relationship class. What advice would you give teachers who just have a random student approach them about something? Like, would you say, like, talk to the person who knows most about the relationship and the sex education within the school? Or is it okay for teachers to just give answers based on what they personally think?
I think it depends on the teacher and how confident they're feeling in that particular situation. Often young people are just asking out of curiosity. And so asking open questions about that young person, about, why they want to know something or what led them to that, I think is really helpful because it continues that conversation and it doesn't shut it down. I think it's important that we're not asking anything in a blaming or shaming way, but actually in an open way. And then I think if the teacher feels comfortable answering for themselves, then, but building on their own personal, if they feel comfortable, I think is the main thing.
Yeah.
And then once that's happened, sending them to or directing them to another member of staff is also okay. But I think it is important that we, the young person will decide who they want to tell a particular safeguarding issue to, and they might then not tell another member of staff. They might not feel comfortable telling someone else.
Yeah.
So I do think it's important for all teachers to be more upskilled in having these conversations so that they are prepared and ready if a pupil decides that they are that teacher that they feel most comfortable with and they trust the most, rather than, just kind of shutting down that conversation and sending them to somebody else who they may not have that same relationship with. But I think it is all about how comfortable that teacher feels and asking open questions to help that pupil.
That's kind of the work that you're doing at Life Lessons, isn't it? It's empowering teachers to be able to have these really meaningful conversations without feeling uncomfortable about the subject matter.
Yeah, exactly. And helping teachers to facilitate these conversations.
Yes.
That's what we're doing. I think there's so much importance around surfacing these conversations because currently they are being... these conversations are happening. They're just happening without a teacher, with their friends, or they are talking about relationships and sex. But actually, if we're surfacing these conversations within a classroom, within a safe space, we then start to break down some of these huge safeguarding issues around peer-on-peer abuse, around sexual harassment, and it is about equipping teachers to bring those conversations up and allow them to happen. And actually, if they're doing that from year 7 and they're having the, in an age-appropriate way, by the time they get to year 11, they're going to be so used to having these conversations.
Yeah.
The pupil, that it will be normalised. And actually, as a school culture, and ultimately what we are, working with schools to do is to change is to improve the culture of the school. And that sends a really clear message to the, to the teachers, and that filters down to the pupils.
To the parents as well, I imagine.
Yeah, and to the parents that, we talk about these things. We're a school culture that is open and we talk about these potentially difficult topics.
Yeah. I imagine that will help improve student mental health and well-being as well, if they feel like it's an open culture where they can share whatever is worrying them, not just necessarily about relationships and friendships, but also any mental health issues they're feeling, anything like that as well.
Yeah, and they're getting a language to talk about these things. Like, they have the words to use, which can then enable them to go and report something, to go and talk about something. And like you said, it's so important that it isn't just going to be about relationships. It will be about mental health. It will be about other things. It just opens that door and it gives them the skills to be able to talk about these really difficult topics.
So when we talk about relationships as well, the videos and the training you guys do, does it ever move into bullying and online bullying, which is also happens within friendship groups and outside of them as well?
Yeah, so within all of our resources, the online world is very much interwoven within every topic because it is everywhere. And so it isn't, we're used, I guess, quite traditionally to be teaching about online safety as a couple of lessons separately. But actually now things are changing and it needs to be very much interwoven into everything that all the conversations around relationships. But yes, we have lots around online safety. We did a big thing around Online Safety Week in February. And I think it's all around helping young people to make informed choices about what is safe and what isn't safe, and not just focusing on the negatives. There are lots of positives about, feeling more comfortable online or meeting other communities that you wouldn't necessarily have met as being online, around arts or poetry, or, we hear from a lot of young people that's a huge thing. But it's really important that we are focusing, and we do focus on what are those negatives and that bullying and that culture, and where's the line with online, where does it become more bullying?
Catfishing, stuff like that.
Catfishing, and if you are going to, what are the things that you need to put in place to keep yourself safe? And hearing from young people and their experiences of how they do it is a lot more powerful than, us saying you need to just, the things that you need to do to keep safe online. And also, young people are so smart that they'll get through blocked walls. They'll get through.
They're more tech savvy than most of their parents, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. And so it's not about saying we're not going to look at anything. We're not going to have online lives, which we all do, and we can't say that. It's about helping young people to be safe and to get the most out of a safe relationship online, with their friends, with their family, with a partner, etc.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's everything I had for you today. Do you know the Life Lessons URL off the top of your head, so we can just direct people to your resources if they need them?
Yes, so it's Life Lessons at Life Lessons RSE.
Perfect. And what we'll do is we'll pop that into the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed this discussion, and I think it's a really important one.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
No worries.
It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Safeguarding Podcast. For resources and more information about our safeguarding solutions, please visit thesafeguardingcompany.com.